Hey guys, welcome back to Church Talk. We're talking about everything involving the local church. My name is Rob, and today we're going to be talking about tips for the worship keyboardist. All right, today I've got a few tips. If you play keyboard in your church, I've got a few tips for you. You may hear these and be like, yep, already doing them. That's great. That means that we're on the same page. Or you might hear these tips and be like, oh yeah, never thought about that. So here we are. We'll talk about tips for the keyboards. Tip number one, don't overdo it. A lot of times when the keyboardist starts playing, they're playing the melody of the song, they're playing like the lead line with the vocals they're going to sing, and then when the vocals come in, the keyboard player may continue to play that same thing. What I found is when the vocals come in and they're singing that melody line, the keyboard can now just be softer, but stop playing that melody line and just be on the root chords. It's kind of letting it melodically fade, and you're just hitting the chord only, allowing the vocalist to take that melody, and the keyboard doesn't take the melody anymore. The keyboard plays it while nobody is singing, and then when you start singing, you come in. Now you're basically just kind of playing the chord, and you're not playing it, fast. You're just kind of hitting it and letting it fade out and letting that instrument, that vocal, to be the instrument that takes the melody. So tip number one would be don't overdo it. Don't play over top of your vocalist. Tip number two, play according to what the speaker is speaking. When you're playing with a speaker, say your pastor comes up and he begins to talk and he's like, hey, can you stay at the keyboard? Yeah. And so you're playing and you got your in-ear in, or got your mono, whatever it is, and you're just playing whatever you want to play, and the speaker's trying to speak and he's competing with you at that moment. So what you want to try to do is to play according to what the speaker is speaking. Be able to, because you don't really have to play particularly in a certain time signature. When you're playing by yourself, you can match what the speaker is speaking. So if he's just giving announcements, then yeah, play on the time signature that you need. Something a little slow, something a little soft, you're underneath of him. But if he's talking, say for instance, it's like he's beginning his sermon, and he's starting to speak a little bit, and he wants you just to stay there for a few minutes while he gets into his message. You don't want to be in competition with what he's preaching. You want to assist him with what he's saying. So you want to come up underneath of what he's preaching, and even in his timing, and as you can, even play your tones and play your chords with the tone of what the speaker's saying. So if the speaker is like building anticipation for something, he's telling a story, you can kind of build anticipation with the chords and the progression that you're playing to kind of go along with him, rather than just playing through a song and having your sound tech to turn you down in the back to be underneath of him. But if you're playing underneath of him and you're playing dynamically with what he's talking about and what he's saying, then you can, in a sense, you become like in a movie when they put sound effects. So they start to put in some music that kind of builds with what's going on in the movie, and it grabs your attention. In that moment, that's what you're doing for the people and for your pastor, and ultimately for the Lord, is that you are helping your pastor grab the attention of the people to get the message that he's wanting to put across. So you don't want to just be playing something underneath of him, or especially over top of him. try to play with whatever it is he's saying, and in the mood that he's bringing it across, that you would want to play that same way. And in your chord progressions, you're choosing chord progressions that's kind of matching what your pastor is speaking. So now if it's like an offering or something, or it's announcements and they just want you to play something, that's a little bit different. You still want to be underneath of them and not over top and overbearing. But when someone's speaking, like, altar calls, things like that, the less is more is so much better. So we're not busy. We're making, a lot of times what I would do is make the actual chord change, like maybe when they stop talking, so that they're bringing a point and I'm kind of letting this melodically kind of fade. When they get to the end of that point, then I'll make another, I'll make a change then. And sometimes it's based upon what they're saying as well, and how they're saying things. So that's tip number 2, is to learn how to play underneath of your pastor and to help the speaker, help your pastor to deliver that point and to deliver what it is they're wanting to deliver. You're helping them to deliver that, not just providing some music for it. Tip number 3 is allow space for other musicians. Many times, like if you learn to play piano, and you've played piano for years, and now you've been asked, "Oh, you play piano? Can you come play keys for us on the worship team and be a part of the team?" Yeah, and you join, and you play the same styles of what you learned because you learned only a piano in your house. You didn't play with the band. You didn't play with, so you're used to filling all the space from the low end all the way up to the high end. You learned how to play this whole entire instrument, and you sound great by yourself. You get with the team, and all of a sudden it's too much, because you don't need to play the bass notes when you have a bass player. You have an electric guitarist who is on the top end. Maybe you don't really need to play so much on that top end. You've got an acoustic guitarist who they're kind of in the middle. So you're like, well, where do I need to be? Well, there's a lot of different places, but you don't need to be all over. You need to kind of find that area to where you kind of fit in with all the other. Now, I'm not saying you don't need to ever be on the lower end or never on the high end, but we don't need to be all over the place. We don't need to overplay, but we need to play with other instruments and allow them their space. There's many times when I'm playing on the keys, I try not to play too much on the lower end of things, because I know the bass player, that's where he's hanging out, is in the low end. So I don't need to be hanging out very much on the low end. Now, if I don't have a bass player, yeah, I'm hitting those low notes a lot, because I'm making up for not having a bass player. But when I'm playing with the band, I'm trying to be conscious of where everybody else is playing, so I'm not playing that same part. I can play a different part, because I've got tons of spaces to go on the keyboard. And so, like on an acoustic guitar, I don't have a ton of spaces to go. I'm playing open chords, So if I'm playing open chords on an acoustic guitar, I'm kind of in that mid-range. I'm kind of stuck right there. And as I move up the neck and capo up, it can sound kind of funny and get kind of tingy. So it's not a good idea, I don't think, for an acoustic guitar, at least if you're leading. Now, if you're not really playing the lead and you're adding to some things, it's fine. So if you're capoed way up, you're fine. I'm not against that. But normally speaking, if you're one acoustic guitar player, you don't be capoed way up the neck and then have your keyboard player doing your mids. You want to swap that role to where you're playing, being able to open chord, and your keyboard player can take the higher note. So the tip number 3 for the keyboardist would be to allow room for other instruments. A bonus tip for keyboards would be to practice with the metronome. Get your timing down. Make sure that you're playing well in time, because many times with the drums going, it keeps us in time, but a lot of times the keyboard player is the one who's playing when there is no drums. And if you're used to playing with a click, and your church is playing with the click, that's going to help you keep on time. But if you don't play with the click, or if you have wedge monitors so you can't play with the click, then you need to make sure that you are on time. So we've had people in the past to where when they play by themselves, or they're playing with a couple other instruments and there's no drums that's there to drive that tempo home, they can get out of time. And if everybody else doesn't flow with them, then it's very obvious that we're all out of time with each other, and we just messed up the song, you know. So that bonus tip would be to practice playing in time. I'm going to give one more bonus tip that I think is important. Now this keyboard, let me grab this camera here real fast and show you what I've got. This keyboard is just a simple Casio. It's not fancy at all. It's kind of a budget keyboard, okay? This is kind of a budget keyboard, right? So with that, if we go anywhere and we play somewhere, like, well, let me back up. At our church, we have a nice new Nord Piano 5. We didn't really need this stage. We didn't need all that. Piano 5 works great for us. Nord makes a fantastic piano. But its price point is pretty high as well. When you go with something like the Casio, its price point is nowhere near a Nord. Neither is it quite the quality, nowhere near the quality of a Nord as well. So when we go places and we play, my son will play keyboard for me most of the time, and he's got a setup, and I'll hopefully do a video with him soon just showing his setup. But there's a lot of different setups like this, but he has some plugins, and he'll take a MIDI cord from this keyboard, put it into his computer, and use his plugins. And basically he's not using any sounds from this just becomes what he's playing. And all the sounds, instead of coming from this keyboard, it's actually coming from his computer and the sounds that he's purchased, and then he runs it out through the system. So those are some options for you as well. If you have a keyboard that's not quite the quality of what you would like, you can run something like Sunday Sounds is one that I think there's a free version of that, but I think there's also a more in-depth version you can get. But there's a lot of different plugins and a lot of different methods of doing that. And I'm not going to show you how to do that in this video. Maybe I will later on with Michael, my son, who plays keys. Excellent keyboard player. There's a lot of videos out there that you can look up about playing with plugins and what you can do with the keyboard. But that's something that you can try. Like, say, if you're like me and you have just a Casio, it's not a bad keyboard. Now, it used to be a toy. I remember when I was a kid, we had a Casio keyboard, and it was just a toy. But more recently, they've moved into the professional quality boards. But I don't think they're quite the quality of some of the other, even your most expensive Casio, I don't think is going to compare to some of the Yamahas and the Nords and things like that. They're just not. Sorry, Casio, but they're just not the same. So when we go places, he will take his setup, he'll take his computer, and he runs out the MIDI and in his computer. It sounds amazing. It sounds great. It takes this kind of a standard, just a run-of-the-mill keyboard, and puts a lot of depth and a lot of different sounds to it that aren't in this sound engine. And so that's something that you can do too. As a bonus tip, begin to look into and invest into some plugins and see what sounds work best for you. So if you don't have the budget to get a new keyboard that you want, but you do have the budget to, you've already got a laptop or whatever, you've got the budget that you can get some plugins and go that route. Hook it up and play with it and see what you like. Maybe there's a Maybe there's a solution for you, so you don't have to buy an expensive keyboard, but you can just get some plugins that will help you get the sound that you're really looking for out of the keyboard that you already have. So that would be my bonus tip number 2. So number 1, don't overdo it. Number 2 is just practice playing underneath of the speakers. Let's say the speakers, the one who is speaking. Number 3, allow space for your other instrumentalists. Bonus tip was practice your timing. And then bonus tip number 2 is invest in some plugins. So if you've gotten any value out of this video, make sure that you hit the like button. And if you're not subscribed already, please subscribe to the channel. Share the video, help me to grow the channel, and we'll see you guys next time on Church Talk. God bless.